everyone. Welcome back to Heartbeat Narratives. My name is Molly, and I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest, Sean Dunnington, who is calling in from New York today. And I'm so excited because we reconnected this summer when I was in Singapore. And he had been living in Singapore for the last year and sent me all these incredible recommendations of things that I should do. But a little bit of background about him. He is a New York-based playwright from the island of Hawaii. His plays include Inversion, Failed Artist, Jew Bash, The Children's Farm, Zap, Flatfish, and Hawaiian Shake. His work has been produced nationally and internationally, with premieres in Hawaii, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, London, and Singapore. And more importantly, in libraries, museums, old basements, public radio stations, indie film festivals, and LGBTQ plus centers. Sean, I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to Heartbeat Narratives.
Hello, Molly. It's so strange hearing my bio read back to me. It makes me wonder why I wrote more importantly in basements, but it rings true hearing it.
I think that is so authentic because sometimes the best art comes from places you least expect it.
Oh, absolutely. And in the places where it doesn't necessarily belong, like places where it's not meant for, and you conform the space and the space changes the story. That's my favorite kind.
So you're from Hawaiʻi Island. Can you tell me where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up in Waimea, which is in North Kohala on Hawaiʻi Island. Some people refer to Waimea as Kamuela because there's a Waimea on many islands in Hawaii. And so for our own postal code, 96743, that's how we differentiate it to the US Postal Service by calling it Kamuela. It's a very tiny Paniolo town nestled in the mountains. It is my absolute favorite place in the world.
I feel like Waimea has this mystical aura about it with the rolling hills, and I can just envision the Paniolo, the cowboys, roaming through with their horses. What was it like growing up there for you? And then now having traveled so much since your childhood?
It is such a mystical place. You're so right. And I feel like it gives me street cred when I'm in Oahu because people will be like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I'll be like, "Oh, Waimea." And they're like, "Oh my God, I love Waimea." And I'm like, "Who doesn't? Who doesn't love Waimea?" It's so hard not to love, though it's changing a lot right now. But what I will say is growing up, I definitely did not appreciate Waimea as much as I do until I left Hawaii for college. Part of that is probably because I watched TV shows where kids and teenagers would hang out and they would do it like at movie theaters and like I don't know where kids hang out anymore, but the nearest movie theater to us was in Kona, so it was like an hour away, and like all these things that you would want to do were far away from Waimea, and unless you loved hiking or nature, it's maybe not the place for you. And as a kid, I did not love nature. And this was mostly because I was, for lack of a better term, scared of the world, scared to enter it and go places that I didn't understand and that weren't structured. To like say in short, I was just really sick as a child. And so I felt most comfortable in a home setting and in places where there were walls and where I saw the boundaries of it. And it wasn't until I left and moved to California for college and came back and just realized one was less sick and was in a juncture in my life where I was able to realize that the kind of jagged edges of everything and expansiveness of everything was what made it so unique and beautiful and special. So I not nothing feeds me like going home nowadays.
I love hearing that you've had this expansive growth. I was curious, can we talk a bit about your playwriting? I feel like you have this gift that you're sharing with the world, bringing a new perspective into whatever you create. What lights you up, Sean? What makes your heart beat?
I've been writing plays since I was 15. Not good plays, but I have been writing them since then. Who writes a good play at 15? No, probably someone. Anytime I see an amazing production, I'm like, who is this playwright? And then I'm like, oh my God, they're like so much younger than me. It both brings me so much joy and also a fair amount of anguish. I've loved theater ever since I was allowed to start being in community theater productions. I want to say, and I don't know if this is leaning into a stereotype, but being a queer person and growing up in Waimea, which is still a pretty rural town with all like the Paniolo roots, can like feel, or at least when I was growing up, feel like a bit on like the tougher end of what maybe masculinity is supposed to look like. I found theater as a space where I could really explore what it felt like to be me uninhibited. And thinking back to what shows was I in that made me feel like that, and I'm like Beauty and the Beast, I was the egg seller, and in Les Mis, I was the guy who got crushed by the cart. So I'm not really sure what character I was that might have unlocked something in me, but maybe it was just the process of being in a space where you are encouraged to really feel your body and be present with your emotions. As you know, as a playwright, I don't know, all my playwright friends can agree to this. We are constantly applying for grants, residencies, fellowships. I went to grad school and I had to answer a question similar to this when I was applying of what inspired me to get into playwriting. And I probably used to give some kind of answer. I didn't see characters that represented me, and so I wanted to write them myself. And I feel like a lot of us have that kind of entry into playwriting. But then it almost feels a little, I don't know. There's something that's like slightly like haimakamaka about it. That's like, who am I as like a 15-year-old to be like, I now will be like the representer of the gay. I only know myself at that point in my life and my friends and the people who have helped me grow. So I'd say when I did start writing, I think I just had so much fun. And also probably I had a bit of a feeling of control, like I mentioned earlier, like I was really sick growing up and I felt like a lot of things were out of my control. So being able to shape a world and understand how it works in and out and communicate that to the people in my play and then the people watching my play, that just really hooked me. And I would say now that understanding of theatricality is still what keeps me going. And when I say theatricality, I define it as the shared relationship between what's on stage and what's off stage, and that what's on stage represents something that it's not, and is constantly teaching that to what's off stage to understand it as that thing that it's trying to be. And I think that kind of like communication is so unique to theater and so beautiful. And it really doesn't feel like a gift to share. I feel lucky anytime I get the chance to be in a space where people are gifting me their time and presence. That's what feels like the real gift because our time is so precious. And if someone's giving me like even just 90 minutes, they made plans with their friends, they got dinner, they're going to see my show, they're maybe going to plan on getting together afterwards to talk about it. And we have a finite amount of those in our life. And so if someone gives one of those nights to me, I really hope to exchange something with them that feels worthwhile.
As I hear you talk, I feel so inspired because I'm having all these flashbacks to high school theater rehearsals. And I was also a theater kid, but mostly because I was so shy that I wanted to have a space to
Mm.
express and be around people who were more expressive and creative than myself. But you are creating that environment for other people now. So you've been on both sides of this theatrical experience. Are there shows that have really resonated with you, whether it's Broadway shows when you were a kid or a play that just sparked something in you that you could share about?
That's a great question. I studied abroad in London. That was probably my favorite theatrical experience of my life. I remember one of the plays I saw. I find theater to be a lot more democratized in the UK than it is in the US, just more accessible, maybe both financially and also culturally. Like it's more woven into something that people are taught to care about. And I was watching on this staircase, I was watching this woman fly through the air. literally fly through the air. And I had no idea what the mechanisms were that were making her fly. And I think the illusion of her flying was exciting, but what's more exciting is the expression that she had while doing it. And I didn't know in that moment. I thought, do you look so elated because you're having fun doing this stunt, or because your character is experiencing a really important moment to them? And it seemed like a mixture of both. And I think what I realized in that moment is, oh, so this isn't just something that is for us. This is also for you. This process of putting on a play is an experience that you are reliving every day and night. Not to say there's such an unhealthy trope in theater where like we should always be the forever grateful playwright where we're like down on our knees just saying thank you to everyone for letting us do anything. And we can't really complain about everything because like it's such a gift to be able to engage with our emotions and perform. But still work and it's really hard. But I think that moment opened me up to thinking like, oh wow, I think this is going to be fun.
I love those moments where it's almost like a transcendent experience where you don't remember when it was, what it was called, who wrote it, but you remember feeling it so deeply. And that is the moment that came forward for you. There's a quote out there where maybe it's Maya Angelou. She said something like, you won't remember what people said, but you'll remember how it made you feel. But you remembering that moment of how you felt in your body and that it could be not just for the audience, but for the people performing as well is like so deep.
I was doing a workshop last night and I asked the playwrights and dramaturgs that I was working with for when I was getting feedback. I said, now the first thing I asked for was, what happened in this scene? And please tell me what happened without referring to the text. Because what is more important to me is really what you remember. And even if they're getting it wrong, like what actually happened, and they're saying something that's not true, the way that they remember it and the way that they describe the way that they remember it is the best way for me to glean into how are they experiencing the work.
I would love to know how you get into your writing zone. And do the words just flow once you're sitting at your kitchen table writing? Or do the words come to you in other moments, like in dreams or when you're walking? How is that process of writing for you?
It's changed so much over the years. Before I really knew what I was doing, it was so easy. just I would just write down tons of pages and then I would do them. And that's all it was. And they were messy and unrefined and so worth it at the time. But then when I started really getting more educated and having more experience, I realized that there was a lot more work to it than what I was doing. I'd say things do not come to me as naturally now. Sometimes I feel like I need to lock myself in a closet and leave my phone and everything else like in like my neighbor's house just to force me to write. Like when I was in Singapore, I had a deadline for this play. I said to the theater I was working with, I literally need to leave. And in Singapore, it's a city state. So to leave means to leave the country. So I went to a small island in Vietnam called Phu Quoc, and where I was just away from everything for a few days because I just needed to isolate myself. Really, the thing that gets me going is deadlines. If I have a deadline, I will be up all night cranking out pages. And once you're really in that flow state, it's good. And I would say, even after with all these plays that I've written, I'm still young, but even with all the plays I've written, I am still figuring out really what my groove is, what's the best process for me. But I would say, unfortunately, the best place that I write is on a couch. And I say unfortunately because there just aren't a lot of couches in public. As many as I want.
I just have to say, I'm muting myself because I'm laughing through everything that you're saying. I feel like your sense of humor is so vibrant, but I don't want this whole interview to be just me laughing at everything.
No, I would so prefer that. Leave it on. You're being so nice. Molly, you've always been so nice to me. Or is one of the components of this, do we talk about how we met, or is that not a part of this?
We can talk about how we met. Yeah.
Because we met, what, it must have been 4 years ago in a
Was
sacred
it?
space that is not there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kavaivai in Mo'iliili.
yeah. It was 4 years. I think I'm basing this on the fact that I was just in Singapore for a year, and before that, I was in New York for 2 years for grad school. And then I was in Honolulu for a year before that. So my boy math in my head is saying that's four.
And I remember we would have lots of conversations in Kavaive about our work and our what brings us joy, your playwriting, travels.
I mean, your take, and I'll say this in the most general sense, on life and your personal narrative for how you reconnected with Hawaii, I thought was so inspiring. And I'm sure all of your listeners and friends know of how bright of a light you are. And yeah, I'm just smiling ear to ear, even just seeing you. I sometimes I don't even know how you're real.
Okay, you had me cracking up there because I feel like who I am at home is a lot more introverted, and then who I am in the world, I try a lot harder. So,
Mm.
thank you so much for saying all that nice stuff. But I just feel like with this podcast, it's such a cool opportunity to have a reason to talk to interesting people who love what they do.
I appreciate you inviting me, and I do love what I do. When I was in Singapore, I did this event that was like a assembly of plays that I've written in the last 5 years. Kind of the idea was I'm teaching playwriting workshops in Singapore. I'm trying to become a part of the community and also trying to share what I've learned, but without proselytizing, worst word to use for this, but without proselytizing like New York theater in a Southeast Asian landscape. And so we wanted to show that I could not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And so we wanted to share some of my work. And so we put together excerpts of 5 of my plays and unified them around the theme of queerness. And the name of the event was so stupid. It was Queering the Play, colon, a very specific timeline from one gay Jew. And it was a look at how has my understanding of queerness evolved with my understanding of theatricality, and how do they speak to one another, and how can I relate that in a general sense to like the average queer playwright coming of age. And so I'd say a lot of my earlier works were plays that were concerned with queer belonging, where the problem in the play was that the character was gay, and that's like the worst thing that could ever happen to them, and there's like probably out like a mom that hates the character. And so a lot of my plays were cycling through that. I had to play Zap, I play Flatfish, The Children's Farm. And then when I went to grad school, I became a lot more interested in power dynamics, and that's stuck with me. I'm really interested in toxic work power dynamics. Actually, you know what? Saying it out loud, I can definitely relate it to some experiences in my life, but I will not say which ones. And I've become, sometimes there will be like something that happens to me and I think, oh, this can be a play. But I find that the personal experiences I have are less and less compelling to me to write about. I had this brilliant professor at NYU Tisch, Susan Laurie Parks, who's one of the most brilliant acclaimed playwrights of our generation that's still alive today and will be alive for a long time. She's very young. And said something along the lines of, why would you want to write about your life when you've already lived it, when you can write about everything you haven't lived? That's not what she said, but that's like how I remember it. And she is obsessed with Shakespeare, and she talked about Shakespeare writing about kingdoms and myth. And yes, Shakespeare is considered a great adapter slash plagiarizer, but aside from that, what I'll say is there's so much for me to write about that I either am curious about, want to learn more about, am afraid to write about. Why would I want to just write about my trauma? But we all start with that. So many playwrights, we all start when we're young. Not all, but many start and they think, oh, what they want to see is like the worst thing that's ever happened to me, dramatized in a very violent and gruesome way that I will make seem political. That's what we think is gonna get us going, but I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me anymore. This last play I wrote, Inversion, is about a crew of scientists landing on Mars with the mission to colonize it. And upon landing, the mission is defunded, one might say doged, and this crew loses their chain of command and needs to figure out how to form a new hierarchy and needs to figure out what kind of future do they want to create with the question of can we ever really escape ourselves, even if we leave it behind? And maybe that's been inspired by me just traveling and moving around so much and trying to figure out the shape of myself.
You have me cracking up back here with everything you're saying. Thank you. Could we dive a little bit into your Tree Moss collective and how you're building a collective of playwrights in Hawaii? I would love to hear more.
Primas is a collective for emerging and established playwrights in Hawaii, from Hawaii, that write about Hawaii. We are going on 4 years. I started it during my storytelling residency at Kavaivai, and we housed it there, which Kavaivai was very generous in letting us do, with a mission to advocate for playwrights in Hawaii, to develop a more robust and stronger playwriting infrastructure and new play development, and to challenge what can theater look like in Hawaii and what is a Hawaii play now. A lot of playwrights were disconnected from each other, and I was really interested in bringing us together and having conversations about our dreams, about our fears, developing each other's work, and trying to make this something serious, because a lot of playwrights in Hawaii, unfortunately, have to treat playwriting like a hobby because there are very few theaters that focus on new plays. As far as I'm aware, maybe three across Hawaii. We wanted to figure out how can we survive as playwrights, both financially but also spiritually, without needing to rely on theaters to develop our work. We've had three cohorts. We've opened up Tremos to all parts of the world that have people that identify as a Hawaii playwright, which is a funny question because when we get new applications, sometimes we'll ask the question, is this person a Hawaii playwright? And I still don't really know what that means, because like we've had people apply that have not really been to Hawaii and don't really have many ties to it, whether that be ancestrally or physically. Like they've written a play about Hawaii. Is that a Hawaii play? What about someone that's from Hawaii but has never written about Hawaii? And you wouldn't really know through their work that's a part of their lived experience. Is that a Hawaii play? And so our working definition is inherently changing and open and somewhat undefinable, but also somewhat known. Unfortunately, a lot of our understanding is, for lack of a way better term, vibe based. You know a Hawaii play when you encounter one. And so we workshop each other's work and kind of are trying to figure out in the development of each other's plays, and with support from some generous foundations in the US, like the Dramatists Guild Foundation. What are we doing and what can we do more of? And with an emphasis on, and how can we advocate for each other to do more? And how can we advocate for each other to be paid better and have better rights? The name Tremos was just a placeholder. And I actually originally was interested in, oh, I wonder like what like Hawaiian word we can use. And my dear friend and mentor at the time, Dr. Punihe Light at Manoa, she basically was like, why would you give it a Hawaiian name unless it inherently is that? Basically, the name comes with it, like when you know what it is. And it didn't really feel authentic to assign a name that wasn't inherent to the mission. And so Tree Moss was inspired by a Walt Whitman poem from a series, I think Live Oak with Moss. And if you ask me what the poem's about, I would say you'd have to ask me 4 years ago because I forgot.
Thank you so much for the backstory, because I think that's a beautiful thing that you're growing and cultivating, even if it's vibe based, it's still
Oh God,
developing as
I
it
regret that
goes.
terminology. I regret it, Molly. What I will say is we are planning a short play festival. That's our plan, at least. We've been having all these conversations of, do we do something that's scrappy, that when we just want to put something together and just be in community with each other, or are we trying to do something that's cleaner, feels professional, where we connect with industry professionals and try to show that this is one way that playwriting can look like in Hawaii. And what we're realizing is we just need to do whatever lands, because that is what's going to be most authentic to us. And it looks like it's going to be something that's probably more scrappy.
I love this so much. I was reading a little bit about what you had written regarding the process of playwriting, and you wrote something so beautiful about the expansive potential of playwriting extending beyond the stage and into communal healing. Could you talk about that a little bit? How do you want people to feel when they leave one of your plays?
It's a great question, and it's complicated because playwriting can exist in so many ways. And the way that most of us understand it is as something that we watch. And I'm much of the time very curious about playwriting as process, especially as communal process. So when I talk about healing, I mean, there's of course like, I'm not the biggest fan, and I'm pretty skeptical of playwriting as a way of healing from your own traumas and problems that you're working through, because I don't really want a play that feels like someone's own therapy. I think our journals do a great job as that. I don't need to make someone pay money to watch my journal. Also, I hate journaling. So I guess, I don't know, maybe it's because writing also feels like it's whatever. But I do think there are parts of playwriting in process that can be applied to other forms in a more hybrid way that makes it relate to healing. So specifically, I'm thinking about, and I've already mentioned UH Manoa, and I mentioned Punihei at the Native Hawaiian Place of Learning Advancement Office. So UH Manoa is a designated TRHT campus center. TRHT is Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. It's a framework made by the Kellogg Foundation. And this office, led by Punihei, follows the work of Dr. Gail Christopher, who's does a lot of work with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in TRHT, and they've adapted and readjusted it to a Hawaii framework. So TRHT offers something called racial healing circles, which is basically where we'll sit in a circle and with guidance from facilitators, we'll share our stories with one another, both as a way to understand one another better, to understand both our differences and what brings us together, to work through biases, assumptions, stereotypes, and to really give voice and heart and humanity to people that we have either generationally been conflict with, have been oppressed by, or oppressed. And it's a really beautiful process that then we share our stories with guided prompts. You're basically leading storytelling workshops. You are asking people to tell stories to one another. And you are doing that by first giving an example of your own story, because the Polina circle facilitators, and Polina is the Hawaiian word for kind of what sticks us together, what brings us together and unites us. So that's why they replaced racial healing circle with the Polina circle. And there's also an emphasis on our relationship, not just with ourselves and each other, but also the land, and how do they all contribute and nourish one another. And so the facilitators will share their own stories because they always show by example first. And when I came into this process, these amazing facilitators, they were professors, activists, scholars coming from all walks of life that were passionate about this work. They would read kind of a script of their story. And the first thing I thought is scripts are great. I write scripts all the time, but a script is set in stone. And if you are sharing this same story over a year, 2 years, your story's not growing with you. What I was interested in is how can I work with these facilitators, collaborate in a way where we can unleash our stories from their kind of locked in paper form, and how can we use playwriting, dialogue exercises, character studies as a way to better understand ourselves, each other, and how we stay present and share a story. And so when I say playwriting as a form of healing, I really mean playwriting as process. There's like beautiful forms of devised theater, there's drama therapy, there are a lot of more like formal ways that are already established of playwriting into community processes. But what I specifically mean is taking playwriting and bringing it into spaces where it doesn't really belong, and thinking how can we use dramatic form as almost like a problem solver, or like a weird solution in a way that we didn't really think before. So that's the primary way. And kind of the three principles that I always preach that have just been taught to me by other people are: one, mean what you say, because what we say for a play is every word counts. Every word always counts, but like I said earlier, when you're asking people to spend their money and time on you, and you have a limited amount of pages, every word better count, especially because every character better mean what they say, and there shouldn't be any fillers. Everything should be intentional and with purpose. I'll use the example of when you have a crazy story that happened to you, and then you tell it to someone and you're both excited, and then someone else is like, oh, what's the story? Or the story comes up, and then you start telling it by rote, and then the story kind of loses meaning. The person might be taking away the meaning, but you are not able to express the same kind of excitement. So what I'm curious about is, how can you still share a story and mean it and have it be exciting to you? And sometimes I would say that might mean telling it in a way that you've never told it before, not using any of the same language, trying to understand where the story stands with you now versus where it stood with you yesterday or years ago. The second I would say is listening, which is more what I learned in acting school. Listening not only to yourself, but to others, or maybe I should say not listening just to others, but yourself. Because you can really tell when someone's listening to you on stage. When there's two actors speaking to one another, you can feel when someone is just like reciting lines versus when they are actually responding to a conversation. If two people, if I said come to me and you said stay away from me, and I said come to me and I said it in a very alluring way, and you said stay away from me, let's say like in a very like business casual way, it might feel like we're not having the same conversation. But there's a way for you to really listen to me and respond to where I'm coming from, and then for me to listen and respond back. And I would say that can apply to your own story, that when you're telling a story, you should be able to listen to yourself. And this kind of leads to the last thing, which is a willingness to change, not just a willingness for your story to change, but a willingness for you to change, which is in some kind of way like a liberation. And that's where healing, I think, really comes in. The exam, I remember when I was leading, this was a week-long workshop series that I did with the facilitators. Every session was, I think, 3 to 4 hours, and we worked with a story and worked on unlocking it and letting it be something new to us. The story I used was how I got prom queen in high school, and how my understanding of that has changed over the years, and how it started as something that confused me to something that made me feel accepted to something that I resented because it made me feel like I was locked into a binary or was being made fun of, to something that ended up being more of a way for me to understand my community's understanding of me and where they saw me. Something that I think is really beautiful about a story is that the story doesn't change, but the memory of it and the way that you share it and the impact that it has on you is constantly evolving. So that's where I feel like playwriting comes in handy. And I say playwriting versus like fiction or nonfiction because I am focused on the theatrical form of writing, not just like writing that you do on paper, but writing that you do that's meant to be shared out loud and received and understood by someone else.
I really appreciate all of this context, and I love how you allow it to grow with you and take on new forms, the story itself, with where you are currently in your healing. I think that's a beautiful thing. And for the people who are listening, where can they find you and your work if they want to learn more about you and your processes and your art?
Well, they can go to my website, seandunnington.com, where I have a map of a lot of my plays. I love maps. And I have a Substack, I guess, that I have left grossly unattended. I'm planning on surprising everyone soon, anywhere between tomorrow and a year from now, with a new Substack post. Or you can find me at this alleged Scrappy Festival sometime in December, maybe the 16th. And if it doesn't happen December 16th, then it will happen later. And you'll know by looking at my website. Molly, thank you so much for letting me hear. I have a inkling that this has probably gone on longer than most of your interviews.
I think this was the perfect length. I'm so over the moon that we had this time together. Mahalo, everyone, for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode. Aloha.
Aloha.